Welcome everyone to another episode of the Shaman's Way podcast. As always, this episode comes from the teachings of our amazing friend and shaman in residence, Cricket. We hope you're enjoying these podcasts as much as we enjoy making them, and I'd like to take just a moment to ask you if you would please leave us a rating and a comment in iTunes or whichever podcast player you're listening to us from. Giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others is the biggest way you can tell us that you like our show. Now, without further ado, on with the episode.
Alchemy and Shamanism. It was way more than 10 years ago when I started to flirt with the writings of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, and I have mentioned them many times in my podcast, so bear with me as we explore another aspect of shamanism in relationship to alchemy. I have found similarities in the myths that Joseph Campbell wrote about and the findings that Jung discovered while delving into the psyche, into the depths of his own patience. It was way more than a few years ago that I started to read more about Jung's last writings. I was very fortunate to live in a city where there was a Jung forum, and that comprised of psychiatrists and psychologists who were adept in using Jung's analysis or analytical techniques with their patients. At the forum would host monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly topics and discussions and lectures on the various aspects of Carl Jung. I was fortunate to be introduced to many of his ideas and ideology presented by incredibly learned people whom I was fascinated by. One of the last writings that Jung did, and probably the most detailed, was regarding his ideas on alchemy. He was delving into alchemy, the deepest, most hidden aspects of the psyche. And in doing so, at that time in his life, he had started to lose more and more respect from the psychiatric community and in Europe at the time. But as he delved into alchemy, he also found that what little respect he did have quickly kind of went out the window. Even today, amongst those who study him, very few seem to be interested in his alchemical thoughts. His last book on alchemy took him 10 years to write. And to be very frank with you, it would take me 20 years to read and likely another 20 to even begin to comprehend some of the depth of the work that he did. Through the years, he began to see patterns emerging in his patients. What he concluded was that the alchemical or the alchemy images explained the archetypal roots of the modern mind, and that it underscored a process of transformation leading to the integration of the personality, and in some regards even the subpersonalities. How does this relate to shamanism? And I think that's, was really always the question for me. Every time I went to the Jung Forum, I was forever listening to these wonderful lectures and trying to bring home the ideas and teach them to my circle that I had going on at that point in time, and trying to relate his understanding of alchemy and the human psyche in relation to shamanism. So the spirit world nor the human psyche can be understood in conceptual terms. What I believe is that it has to be understood as living images and living symbols. Shamanic practitioners or shamans themselves, we are already exposed to the spirit world as a living reality. Many times you've heard me say that the spirit world operates independent of us and not dependent upon us. Alchemy reflects that process of personal transformation, and it goes into the metaphor of transmuting base metals into gold. I think that's the ultimate metaphor for alchemy. Shamanism reflects the human psyche, the woundedness, as a process of self-transmutation towards wholeness and healing. Through the years, I've seen many people, myself included, who've done countless journeys. We've had extraction healings, returned more to wholeness through soul retrieval, through curse removal work, through past life work. What we ultimately are seeing is our own harmony restored and our self-equilibrium returned. Jung equated individuation with self-realization. Alchemy, like shamanism, deals fundamentally with the basic mysteries of life. Both approaches are neither abstract nor theoretical, but they are experimental in nature. And shamanism is an experiential. We have wonderful podcasts. We can write lots of different articles, and we can have an intellectual understanding of it. But the basic mysteries of our life, the basic mysteries of our human psyche is experimental. The secrets of shamanism and journey work, like alchemy, is that it is a personal journey of transformation. And again, it cannot be explained, but fully, more so, it can be experienced. We benefit by channeling the effects into spiritual growth. The instinctual urge, I think, for growth and for transformation really does lie within us. Whether we acknowledge that instinctual urge or not, I really don't know. It is my understanding or my hope that you, the individual listener, the constant listener, you have an instinctual urge for growth and transformation, or you would not be pursuing an experiential path like shamanism. For this urge, the urge of transformation, to be considered evolutional, it requires that the ego must cooperate deliberately and consciously with the self. So this leads towards self-realization. In Jungian psychology, the prima materia, that primal matter, that primal force, is the original unconsciousness, which is really unconscious, the subjective awareness. Mystics of all times have repeated that in the ordinary state we are asleep or even dead to the true reality. I refer to it as somnambulism, the sleepwalking. We are often somnambulists or sleepwalkers in our own life. In psychology, the fourfold nature of the prima materia is expressed in the four functions which correspond to the alchemical elements. So intuition is fire, thinking is air, feeling is water, and sensation is earth. In his theory, we have a dominant function and we have limited access to one or two others, but the fourth function is inaccessible, elusive, maladapted, inaccessible, elusive, maladapted, or hard to integrate. It is what keeps us from getting it all together, in air quotes. Thus, we are out of balance. Collective unconscious. It's a term I just can't stand, as I believe it lacks the very fundamentals of respect. However, that's wholly my own and my reality. So what I like is that the collective unconscious later became the objective psyche. The objective psyche can be better understood or considered objective for two reasons. One is that it is common to everyone and it has a better sense of the self's ideal than the ego or the conscious self does. Therefore, it directs the self using archetypes, dreams, intuition, and it drives us to make mistakes on purpose. In this way, we move the psyche or ourselves towards individuation or self-actualization. Shamanically speaking, we journey and we work with our spirits to see these patterns, arrest the pattern, and heal the energetic trace patterns that have caused it. Soul and psyche work together. Jung, he made a significant step in defining the unconscious of a person as compromised by both a personal unconscious, so this is proceeding from the experiences of the individual, and an objective psyche. So this is issuing from the inherited structure of the brain and common to humanity. That objective psyche, just as an offshoot, also I think has that transgenerational wounding in it, or that transgenerational gifts. I think that is also part of the objective psyche, that inherited structure of the brain, that inherited structure of the soul that really is common to all of us. Now, this is important to our studies because it helps us understand. It goes some way towards explaining the power of the archetypal, the symbolic systems we see throughout our journeys. The concept of archetypes, those potent universal symbols that appear in myths, fairy tales, dreams. It's an important part of Jung's concept of the unconscious. And this is a direct quote of Jung. It is important to realize that there is no fixed, rigid, alchemical language of symbolism, and it is not possible to draw up a comprehensive dictionary meaning for each symbol, which will describe its use in a very alchemical text. Different alchemists use the same symbol in different ways, and even within the same work, an individual symbol can have many meanings. Although there are core meanings to some symbols, their significance must be read from the symbolic context in which they appear. This can make the study of alchemical symbolism a frustrating experience for those who expect exactitude and fixed meanings for symbols. Instead, we go along with the alchemists. We read their text, try to enter into their view of the world, and beware importing or projecting our own perceptions of their symbols or rushing to a quick judgment of their meaning. Symbols must be seen as a part of the whole emblem and not isolated elements. Often an emblem is part of a sequence illustrating a more complex process, and so each symbol must be seen in the wider context of this extended process. End quote. So in our journeys, I believe that it is not necessarily the individual symbols we see that are important, but what they are doing and how they are relating to other symbolic elements. Our journeys may be seen as sequences, showing us the evolving alchemical process as a drama, a theater of symbols, if you will. And one must sense the underlying process in order to understand the symbolic sequence. So how do we do this? How do we put it all together? First of all, we record our experiences and we review our experiences. I hope you do that. I hope after you have a journey, you do either record them auditorily or you record them on paper, and that over time you do begin to review what your experiences have. They become a treasure trove of understanding your own personal spirituals and what they mean. Even if you have a skeletal structure for what that symbol means, it can mean something different. As I just indicated, it can mean something different based on where and how you see it and what you see it in relation to. So over the years in my journeys, I have seen patterns emerge. I have also developed personal relationships with spirit. I've gathered my own pouches, my own tools, those sorts of things, my paraphernalia, if you will, which deepen my understanding of myself and allow me to understand more deeply my own psyche and ultimately the collective psyche I delve into. By listening to truly thousands of journeys over the years, I have seen many patterns. I've seen patterns for newbies. I've seen patterns for men, children, various psychological problems. We can no more separate ourselves from our psyches than we can separate ourselves from the objective psyche. My role is to get us there, ground us in our experiences, and hold that space beneath or for the people that are journeying with me or journeying through this series of shamanic teachings and understandings that we have. Oftentimes we journey for ourselves, but oftentimes we are asked to journey for others. We have done quite a bit. We journey into the objective psyche and we return with thoughts and ideas that are relevant to all, such as when we do psychopomp work for large groups. We all come back with ideas and thoughts and experiences that are relevant to all of the people in the room, that may be relevant to the people that have perished. So, that's an aspect of it. I'm going to just delve into one thing that is a common symbol in our dreams and also our objective psyche, and that's a house. And oftentimes we encounter houses in the lower world, the upper world, the middle world, obviously, and also in our dreams. Now, the house can be considered to be a symbol of every aspect of the dreamer. The different parts of the house represent different aspects of the person. For example, the basement or the ground floor could represent the unconscious. The kitchen could depict the creative aspect by which we take raw materials and produce nourishment, the nurturing aspect. Therefore, one can assign different aspects to various parts of the house. Sometimes we dream that we are in a house that we know but discover various rooms we did not know were there. If one applied that to our premise that the house represents the dreamer, it may be saying that we have many parts or many talents that we have not used, and of course that we may not even be aware of. If you dream of a specific house or a specific room in that house, you may have particular memories associated with that place, of which your unconscious is reminding you. I believe we have all dreamt of houses, and if you are ready to say, "No, I haven't," well, I encourage you to let one develop for you in your journey state. The journey is for you to explore your house, which areas are locked, which rooms are light, which rooms are dark. So I encourage you as a exercise in studying the alchemy of yourself or the shamanism of yourself. I recommend that you journey to a house or that you journey to a place where you know there will be houses. And are there areas of the house that are locked? If we look at the story of Blackbeard, where he had a beautiful house and his wife lacked for nothing, but there was that one key that she couldn't go into that one room that was locked. And when she did go into that unlocked room or that locked room and she turned the key, what she discovered were the bodies of his other wives. So that represents, from a storyteller perspective, that represents the unknown, the dark secrets ourselves, the parts that we've died to, the parts that we've killed off of ourselves, the dreams we've hidden away, the ugly bits that we don't want anyone else to see. Another exercise is to travel to an allegorical house through the middle world, one that we're all familiar with. So that could be your home, That could be your grandmother's house. That could be a home that may be a historical site that you visited, that you felt when you walked in very, very familiar with. So I want you to journey to that allegorical house that has food. It has many rooms. It has games, activities, our wants and our needs. This allegorical house, when I did this journey for people in my circle, we all journeyed to a particular mall that is quite well known in Edmonton, called West Edmonton Mall. Their task in this particular journey was to go to this house and return to the room with our impressions of the imprinted psyche of this house. So then what I had my circle do is I had my circle journey to this West Edmonton Mall, but 10 years in the future, and return to tell me what they see. So everyone got to journey. And what I noticed was that there were very intense vibrations, and there was lots of music and sound that we had in the building. One of the people who journeyed went to a time where he died, and he pushed into heaven, and he saw rows and rows of houses like London, like those row housing, with sleeping compartments up above, and all of his relatives were there. And the journey was empty. No one was there. The energy of joy was still there. The coming back home was joy. And the comforting, the relaxed, there was lots of light. It was daytime. Even though the houses were empty and some were gray and black. But he did notice that a party house was going on down the street. And he saw his mom and dad upstairs in the sleeping quarters. So when he journeyed to the emotion, what he felt was happy, joy, sadness, love. And then the drum ended and the journey ended. Another person during this journey of the archetypal house became Robinson Crusoe and had a house on the beach, which was calm and peaceful. And this person couldn't get out of it. He couldn't get out of it. He could go in the ocean. He couldn't go deep, but he could return to the house. He could return to the dream of the ocean. He became carefree and relaxed. So let yourself go with the house. Another person could not go to one house, but ended up in a house she didn't want to go, where the doors and the windows, they were overlooking a graveyard, and there was a bridge to the graveyard. And the house was very old. It was very old looking. Even though when looking out, she was looking out onto new land with perfect rows, orderly and symmetrical. In her journey, it was snowing, and she could not see out the way that she had seen before, so the glass was deeply etched. Skeleton keys for the door. That was actually my favorite part of the house. You know, the kind of skeleton keys you see on TV in the old movies. And then also she had a basement, but she had no recollection of that basement. But she had a root cellar, and she was pulling open the hatch when the journey ended. So were the windows etched? Why was there a skeleton key for the door? There were other aspects of that journey. For one other person had an exaggerated house, and then it went back to normal. The first house that he lived in until grade 8, then he saw a bridge and he had to walk over the bridge. And he went into a shallow ravine and there were pussy willows. And the sense that he got, this is going to be traumatic. And he peered into the windows and he needed a ladder, but not in the journey. In the journey, he could just float on up and look in the window. The back door had 3 steps up, but he couldn't get past the first step. And the basement had details and sights, very rich detail. And there were sad events in the house, and they were the equivalent of abandonment. And he was reliving brief imprints of himself and that trauma that filled his youth. He also had a skeleton key for the upstairs door, and each room was a brief description or a brief memory. Also, the energy and the spirits were there, and the doors, the slats were green, the pantry was there. There was feeling creation of wood, and walked into a gate, and that's where the end of his journey came to be. So there are many ways of exploring that alchemical aspect of ourself, the alchemy of the psyche and the soul, the objective psyche, the objective soul, the hidden aspects. What are those aspects? And how do they explain the archetypal roots of our human mind? And how do these houses, as an example, underscore the process of transformation? How do they underscore the integration of our personality? How does this relate to the spirit world? How does this relate to the spirit world being understood not in conceptual terms, but rather as living images and symbols? These houses were living images, but they were also symbols. The spirit world is a living reality. None of them could have said, this is the house I would have ended up in. This is the house I would have seen. None of them had that image in mind of where they were going to go or what they were going to do. So after you work on yourself and you've done countless journeys and you've retrieved more wholeness, are you moving towards individuation and self-realization? Are you dealing with the fundamental mysteries of your own life? Are you approaching it as neither abstract nor theoretical, but rather experimental in nature? Are you experiencing your life? Are you experimenting with the spirit world so that you have a better understanding of yourself? Again, the secret to shamanism and journey work is that it is a personal journey of transformation. I can't explain it to you, but you have to experience that. This is the prima materia. It is the undifferentiated condition of ourselves, of our ordinary consciousness, which is really unconscious. That, again, we refer to the subjective awareness. And where are we in that fourfold? Yeah, the alchemical elements of intuition as fire, thinking as air, feeling as water, sensation as earth. Where is our dominant function, and how are we limited by that inaccessible, the elusive, the maladapted, or the difficult to integrate? What keeps us from getting it all together? What keeps us from being out of balance? And when we explore those symbols of ourself, can we bring ourselves back into balance? Can we rely on our objective psyche? Is our objective psyche really common to everybody? Does the conscious self exist for everybody? So when we journey, we work to see our patterns. We arrest the pattern and we heal the energetic patterns that have caused trauma and drama for us. The soul and the psyche are absolutely intertwined aspects of ourselves. We have many potent symbols appearing to us in our journeys. Over the years, I have come to understand what some of those symbols are, simply based on the common occurrence. So I've come to see that water really is about the depth of the psyche, really does take us into that myth of ourselves. Going into darkened caves and darkened houses, those are the elements and the aspects of ourselves that we have to explore, but we may need to bring a torch or a flashlight or something that is going to illuminate the darkness for ourselves so that we can bring the unconscious conscious. Those individual symbols are important. How are we relating to other symbolic elements? Important. How are we relating to other symbolic elements? How do we do this? How do we put it all together? That's your part of your journey. How do you do this? And how do you put it all together? I really encourage you to record it, to delve into those aspects and make it more known to yourself. What does the raven mean to you? What does the bear mean to you? What does a bridge mean to you? What does seeing a bubbling brook in your journey mean to you? Could it just mean a bubbling brook? Or could it mean a way of walking on that bubbling brook, which then becomes a tiny stream, and then that tiny stream runs into, a big river, and then that river dumps into the ocean, and that ocean may just be your emotions. I leave you contemplating some of these deep. Alchemy and understanding the psyche is really ultimately important to me. And I believe that it can be important to all of us as we do seek that integration and self-awareness. I leave you with these thoughts. I leave you with these potential journeys for you to do. And I do hope that you are able to journey into the house, into the psyche, into the soul. And who are you? Where do you become? What do you become? How do you experience yourself? How do you see yourself? How do the spirits see you? Have you ever walked up to a pool of water that is very still and taken the time to actually see your reflection? And what is your reflection in the spirit world? Does it look like you, or is there a spiritual aspect of you staring back? All of your journey of self-exploration, and part of the journey of healing not only for yourselves, but perhaps even healing for other people and understanding journeys for other people. I look forward to any comments, any thoughts, any ideas that you have, and I wish you and bid you a fond farewell. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us here on the Shaman's Way podcast. If you have any questions, would like to make a request for a future episode, or if you're looking for other shamanic resources, including free drumming tracks, please visit us at shamansway.net. Until the next episode, be well, everyone.